In 1980, the Stranglers recorded the intriguingly titled Vietnamerica.
It's over, linger on nightmares of the waste. The pagan values of blood, sweetness, and taste. Treasures captured, pleasures enraptured, lose their friendship. Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica. The natives, plaintive, cry in ancient lands. Army, potent, gods have burned their hands. Lightning providers, fatal dividers, spread hate inside us. Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica. So friends, oh friends, in another's face. Liars conspire to hide within God's grace. Treasures captured, pleasures enraptured, lose their friendship. Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica, Vietnamerica.
Okay, a very sublime, at times beautiful, if somewhat roughly recorded, self-recorded in this case, track by the Stranglers. Yeah, coming off a rather rough patch where they were thrown in jail at one point in 1980. I think Hugh Cornwell started the year off in jail, and then they were all, and then after a few weeks or months he was released, and then they were all thrown in jail after a riot had erupted at one of their concerts. And anyway, they recorded 3 songs that year, this, and then Bear Cage and Who Wants the World. Those other 2 were released as singles A-sides in that kind of gap year of albums. but I've always felt that this was the most powerful of those three tracks. It catches them kind of leading up to that more kind of polished, sublime sound that would emerge on the two 1981 albums, The Gospel According to the Men in Black and La Folie. Yeah. Um, and it's several people, particularly the recently departed Dave Greenfield, have completely changed. He's completely changed his arsenal here. Different sounds than sounds that he had first started employing on the Raven, somewhat. But we're hearing these kind of these more pared down yet slightly fuzzy tones. That all that kind of like wobbly, like like arpeggios and such that he was doing on the first three albums have gone. Yeah, and he was kind of just taking a back seat at times. Usually, he playing like doing like these background fills, these percolating little bits in the background behind J.J. Burnel, whose bass was still prominent, even if not as busy as on earlier recordings. Here, he's just kind of placing the rhythmic component amid Hugh Cornwell's very angelic vocal tone on this one. And Cornwell's vocal and the way it interacts with the chordal landings of this track, some really pretty chords. I think I may have heard some major sevenths thrown in there. It just makes for an overall kind of soothing and just slightly, in its own way, almost tranquil number. And yet it also has some of the gruffness in certain areas, particularly the bass. As restrained as it was, it still had that kind of thick slab-like tone of like, well, that we knew from those earlier albums anyway. And let's see, my notes for the track basically, G, well, it has a kind of like just falling opening, those two chords, like an open A, and then with like a descending root note. And then it lands in G with an emphasis on the third, like the D in G, yeah. Da, da, yeah. And with that thick bass, and the chorus guided by the bass and vocals, and the after chorus, which goes up to A minor with that wordless vocal line. That's one of the main earworms of the track for me, that ooh, that. And with some like neon synth tones in the background. And then on the second verse in particular, this sinewy, thin, trebly guitar kind of asserts itself. Three strings, over that, just plucked over that gruff bass and light synth tones. And then on the outro, Cornwell plays this kind of snaky descending guitar figure amid the glowing synth tones, and then he starts to do this kind of like circular pattern. Yeah. Let's see where and a very curious song title. Let's see where these lyrics are going. It's over, linger on nightmares of the waste. The pagan values of blood, sweat, crimson taste. Huh. Treasures captured, pleasures enraptured, lose their friendship, Vietnamerica. The native plaintive cry in ancient lands, omnipotent gods have burnt their hands. Lightning providers, fatal dividers, spread heads inside us, Vietnamerica. So friends, oh friends, paint the mother's face. Liars conspire to hide within God's grace. Treasures captured, pleasures enraptured, lose their friendship. I'm wondering if this is about Vietnamese refugees kind of losing their culture after they came to America following the end of the war, and just kind of Americanizing, losing touch with their roots. Well, I couldn't find any interpretations of these lyrics online, but I imagine this must have been discussed in that book that came out in the early 2000s where Hugh Cornwell discussed all the songs that he recorded with the band. Except I remember I flipped through it at Pal's Books back in, like 18 years ago when it was on the shelves, but I don't recall the entry on this particular number. Um, Anyway, this song first saw the light of day on this 1980 stateside IRS compilation titled Four, which combined some tracks from The Raven, which hadn't been released stateside, and plus some odds and ends, like the 1978 single 5 Minutes, Rocket to the Moon, and then the two other recordings from 1980, which strange. Those both got released as singles A sides. Yeah, Bear Cage and Who Wants the World, and then this one only finally saw the light of day overseas as the B side to their single "Let Me Introduce You to the Family," a single from the La Folie album. This song deserved, despite its rough production, deserved a bit more prominence in their release priorities. Yeah. Recorded during a transitional phase for them, going from one great sound and aesthetic to another, constantly inventive, defying description, categorization, always one of the most sui generis acts to emerge from the UK music scene, and comprised of four very kind of musicians that had distinct personalities, images, and that each kind of dominated the sound in their own way, and yet there was space for each one of them. You could say early on that the Stranglers were basically musically dominated by J.J. Burnel's like thick kind of rhythm guitar like bass, and Dave Greenfield's keyboards, which were always noodling around, almost akin to like a lead guitar player in a hard rock band, while Hugh Cornwell's vocals, usually singing, and would kind of just fill out little sound bits here and there, with a guitar that was almost kind of like at times like a cross between Tony McPhee of the Groundhogs and Brian Eno, almost serving as more kind of like a sound shaper, tonal, like violator, a la Eno, like playing these kind of like half-tutored, fractious notes, kind of interjecting on the kind of guitar like bass work of J.J. Burnel. And J.J. Burnel initially trained as a guitarist, then moved over to bass, just kind of like Chris Squire before him. Some of those bassists who were really prominent in rock bands, like played a lot of notes and really made their presence heard as well as felt. Because traditionally, before them, bassists tended to be more felt than heard, tended to play in the pocket. Yeah, it was coming from that guitarist background and then picking up a bass. Yeah. Anyway, and at this point in the game, they're kind of all kind of reining it in just slightly and are becoming just like the sum of their parts. No one's really dominating as much. Everyone is just kind of playing more kind of in a cohesive ensemble form. And yet, you can follow each one of them individually, or you can just take it all in, by the sum. And either way, it's a rewarding experience. That's what I love about the Stranglers, and that's why I, keep returning to them, over the last 3-5 years, is because each time I listen, or when I revisit after a while, I hear something new that I didn't hear before. Yeah. Anyway, the Stranglers, Vietnamerica, one of their lesser heard tracks that deserves to be heard a lot more. For more Rubies and Sapphires from the catalog of the Stranglers, see the directory of albums by English S artists linked in the description below. Like and subscribe, follow me on social media, share the video, and leave a comment if there are any observations you have about the song we just heard. The interplay, the layers, the melody, the chordal structure, the lyrics, and their meaning, the overall beauty of the track. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear-traveled Trimaximalist, signing off.